Warhammer 40,000 Renegades, Lord of Excess by Rich McCormick. Chapter 4. Living chairs groaned under the weight of their occupants, their spines stretched and ribs splayed open to form seats large enough to house transhuman warriors. 5 such warriors occupied these seats, their genetically enhanced bodies draped in simple togas of white silk. The 6th and final chair played host to a much smaller figure, barely half the height of the others in the chamber, and so slight as to be a child in comparison. She, too, wore a slip of white material, but any claim to simplicity was undone by the amount of jewellery she accented the robe with. She was festooned in gold and silver, bracelets and rings, lining her arms and fingers so that they jangled together noisily at the slightest movement of her body. Rubies and emeralds, the size of eyeballs, dangled from her neck on platinum pendants, pulling her head forward with their weight. They gave her the appearance of an exotic bird. Xantine idly traced a silk-gloved finger around the knuckle of his own chair. The skin twitched in response to his touch, a shiver of either pleasure or revulsion. He wasn't sure which. "My friends," he began, "pleased to hear the conversation in the room die immediately. My counsel. Thank you for joining me here today. I call you because before us lies a difficult choice. So I turn to my most trusted, wise and esteemed peers." Xantine inclined his head to each of the figures in the room in turn. "Vivisk, my composer. Sarquil, my quartermaster. Caranton, my collector. Toricon, my champion." He turned to the woman last. "Phaedra, my muse." She bobbed her head in acknowledgement. Xantine had seen that head bob when he first found her, stinking, clad in rags, forced to steal snake eggs and trap insects to survive. She had lived in a choking swamp on the edge of a world that had been fought over by warlords whose armies used wooden catapults and blunt iron swords as their weapons, crushing their people into rigid social classes and forcing them to die for minuscule gains in territory. Society cast Phaedra out when she was young, calling her a witch or a monster. They were right. She was old already back then, much older than she looked now after countless rejuvenate treatments and flesh transplants. The Adored had ravaged her world, and with the battle fought, Xantine had taken to wandering the planet, his soul swollen with excess. He had been grateful of an audience when he found Phaedra, and he revelled in the detail of the destruction. He expected anger, righteous and delicious, but she had laughed. Her laughter ignited the air, and as the dim sun rose in the next morning, as they stood in the burnt ruin of her hovel, Xantine knew he had found his latest muse. It was these 6 that Xantine would convince of Serene's value, and with these 6 he would plan an invasion of the world. The decision had been made, of course. Serene was too precious, too perfect to pass up, and besides, after the last disastrous raid, where the Adored had been chased away by the Black Legion forces arriving in system, the planet represented the only realistic choice they had. More than that, he wanted it. This world could be liberated, its people freed from the drudgery of their lives, with Xantine as their guide. He began. "Our path has led us to Serene, a planet only recently revealed to us by the weft of the warp. It is, I am delighted to say, a hidden jewel." He used the word Xantine used for it. In the Corpse Emperor's crown. The youthful figure in the chair opposite spat at the reference, a gobbet of thick fluid launching from his mouth to land on the polished stone floor, where it spread out into a domed puzzle, fizzing gently. Xantine's glance was withering. "Quite, Toricon," he said, with mild exasperation. "But could we hold such emanations until we are outside of these rarefied halls?" Toricon lowered his head in a short bow, and Xantine shook off the interruption, raising a hand to Raedron. The shipmaster stepped forward, coughed lightly, and spoke. "Serene is an agri-world, Multiple defense lasers surround the void port on its largest city, and the planetary militia, its soldiers taken from the planet's noble families and made up primarily of their retainers, is well equipped. An elite core of these soldiers are recorded as being chemically enhanced. Despite Auspex scans showing little orbital activity over the past century, these defences appear to be intact. She paced as she addressed them, her high-heeled boots tapping out a staccato rhythm. The world's primary produce is solipsis, a potent chemical used most commonly in rejuvenate therapies across the Imperium. It also finds common use as a base for many sanctioned stimulants, as well as several of the galaxy's more popular and most illegal narcotics. That would get their attention, Xantine thought. Thank you, Shipmaster. He spread his hands wide, palms open, a gesture that he hoped would display humility. He could never be sure. He had forgotten the feeling. Your thoughts, my Senate? He asked the room. Toricon replied first, as he always did. We must take it, Your Magnificence, he shouted, rising slightly from his seat. He was the largest of them, huge even among the genetically enhanced and warp-touched transhumans that made up the warband. Broad pectoral muscles rippled under his white toga as he strained in his seat. My boy, Xantine says, forcing good-natured bonhomie into his tone. This is a place of equals. You do not need to address me as such. A simple lord will suffice. Of course, my lord, Toricon said. My desires are yours. As you will it, this world must be ours. I simply wish to taste in its splendour. Toricon had no deference for etiquette. It was a byproduct, perhaps of youthful exuberance, but it was a trait Xantine found peculiarly irritating. A newcomer to the Long War, Toricon had not fought at Terra, nor during the Legion Wars. After Horus's death and the end of the heresy, he had not fought at Canticle City, where the Black Legion cast a black knife into the heart of the Emperor's children, destroying the galaxy's most beautiful city in a monstrous and unforgivable act of desecration. He had not even seen the beginning of the War Master's 13th Black Crusade, as Xantine's former warlord Euphorus threw away his loyalty to the glory of the Third Legion to ride Abaddon's coattails, joining the wider Black Legion as a member of the Children of Torment. Toricon had come to the Adored later, fresh from Fabius Bile's gene forges, the stink of the Clone Lord's arcane biology raw on his perfect skin. He was the reward, bestowed by Fabius himself, for work well done by Xantine's warband. And as far as prizes from such a creature went, Toricon was a good one. Strong, loyal, and as rapid as starlight. He took to the debaucheries of the Adored as a sword to its scabbard, a natural fit for his regal form. Long, white blonde hair framed a symmetrical face that was split by an aquiline nose and embedded with two eyes of deep violet. They were Fulgrim's eyes, and it thrilled Xantine to command such a perfect reflection of his Primarch. It unsettled him, too, to see such difference in those eyes. Toricon was loyal to a fault. Xantine didn't know if Bile had bred that loyalty into his creations, or whether it was simply his gene seed's natural deference to a superior, but while he may have had his Primarch's eyes, he had none of Fulgrim's deviousness. Xantine found the younger Space Marine's guilelessness and acquiescence cloying, like the attentions of a slobbering pet. But he was useful. Toricon was young, far too young for a warrior to be admitted to the Senate, typically. But Xantine had hastened his ascent, engineering his placement as the sixth member of the group after the death of Talon Janus at the Shrieking Chasm. Power was always held in a light grip amongst the remnants of the Third, and Xantine was conscious of the usefulness of a good yes-man in his decision-making body. Some of the others had grumbled at the appointment, but Xantine, at pains to conceal his involvement in the procedure, pointed to Toricon's unblemished record and popularity amongst the rank and file of the Adored's hedonist, his martial prowess and good humour. Of course, my boy, Xantine said. I'll count your vote cast, making one of our esteemed conclave in favour. An auspicious opening. Who will speak next? Ever the cynic, Sarkwell cleared his throat. Ha! He coughed. Sarkor was never seen out of his Tartarus Terminator plate, not even by his closest allies amongst the Ador's Terminator cadre, and the dark skin of his head was the only part of his flesh and blood body still visible. With one arm he drummed the fingers of his massive power fist, while the other hung back, surgically grafted to the firing mechanisms of his beloved chain cannon. The top of his skull was covered in rippling silver, the result of the Space Marine's practice of dripping the molten remnants of his enemy's war gear onto the bare skin of his head after the close of battle. After generations of raiding, Sarkor now seemed to wear a silver skull cap that shone in the candlelight of the conclave chamber. A hawkish face sat beneath his metal plate, his mouth set in a permanent sneer. A well-equipped army, the creature said. Are we well-equipped, Xantine? Are we ever well-equipped? Sarkor's upper body had been shredded in conflicts long since past, and his augmetic replacements were sterile and ugly in aesthetic. Meaty pistons in his neck worked as he spoke, and their movement exposing raw muscle and veins. Xantine wished his quartermaster would have them replaced with something a little more appealing to look at. We have 3,420 bolter shells, 165 las cannon power packs, and 17 canisters of promethium remazing after our last sortie. Sarkor ticked each of these counts off on his splayed hands. In the court of the Dark Prince, could we even call ourselves equipped at all? Coward, Sergeant hissed in Xantine's head. He has no passion. Let me taste his agony. Xantine clenched, bodily pulse of irritation that he aimed at the demon, its meaning clear. Let me handle this. The Terminator hoarded his material like a dragon, and prizing it from his grasp demanded a lighter touch. My friend, Xantine had said, his hands open across his chest, as if he were welcoming a favoured pet home. These are joyless numbers. What matters is our skill in using such war gear. And on that matter, our armour is impregnable, and our weapons never miss, because we are of the third. Just one of our warriors is equal to 10,000 mortals. Tell that to Janos, Sarkor said. He was one of us, and he died just fine. Janos was a preening fool, Sarkwell. You know that better than all of us. Two had almost come to blows when they shared a seat in the Adored's council. Janos's wasteful recklessness and taste for theatrics clashing with Sarkor's material obsessions. That he was, Xantine. That he was, Sarkor chuckled, leaning back in his chair. He flicked his hand as if batting the matter away, but Xantine pressed the issue. Besides, Xantine said, turning the topic to the wider conclave, the spoils of this world will stock our armory for years to come. If we win, Sarkor said, we are not equipped for protracted battle, and every shell we expend on this wastrel world must return to us fivefold in order to justify the penetration of my stockpile. My stockpile, Xantine thought, working his blackened mouth into a smile to avoid the frown of annoyance that had picked at his facial nerves. Yes, my friend. Serene promises riches unlike those we have feasted upon before, he said. Sarkor snorted and started counting. I need 17,100 bolter shells, 1,800 and... Not just our armory, Xantine cut him off, aware that Sarkor, if he had his way, would talk about his hoard until all the stars of the galaxy blazed out. Our slave decks will know once more the crush of mortal flesh. Our storage hold will be swollen with new and exotic narcotics, and our decadence will call forth wondrous Neverborn for our archives. Xantine turned to Quarantoon with this last promise. The diabolist sat motionless in his living chair, his back straight and his gaze even. His shaved head was covered in spidery tattoos that seemed to shift in the weak light of the chamber, forming symbols and shapes before fading back into the skin the colour of bronze. Once of Lorgar's 17th Legion, Toon had been compelled to travel far from his brothers. His need to research and catalogue the strangest and rarest demons, driving him to the depths of debauchery that even his fellow word-bearers found unsettling. Now he served with the Adored, his loyalty assured as long as Xantine ensured his obsessions was fed. My lord, Toon said, his hoarse voice hesitant. Xantine knew his attentions lay elsewhere. Serene had survived the opening of the rift. the galaxy-spanning tear in reality the corpse worshippers called Cicatrix Maledictum. In relative calm, the whims of the warp clouding it from view and decreeing that this world escaped the horrors visited on others who had been less lucky. Xantine, with Toon alongside him, had heard stories of a planet whose billion-strong population had fused together in one agglomeration so large that it had breached the atmosphere. On another world, the sudden influx of warp energy sent mortal populations into such ecstasies and agonies that entire new clades and classes of demon were vomited into existence. Toon was pragmatic, especially compared to the mercurial Emperor's children, but he was also an egotist, and ached to be the first to study such esoteric beings. This world will offer a bounty of base attractions to those so inclined. Toon looked pointedly at Toricon, but the younger Space Marine appeared not to notice, preoccupied instead by measuring the span of his bicep with a gigantic hand. But I believe our journey must take us into the depths of the Great Rift, where we may better escape the attentions of our former slave master. Xantine snarled at the reference to Abaddon, and we will find more scintillating pleasures. More interesting pets for your menagerie, you mean? Said Xantine, a teasing edge to his question. The Adored do not sally forth to glorious combat purely to fill your vases and amphorae with tattered scraps of monstrosity, word-bearer. Toon blustered as his tattoos seemed to swell faster as his hissed responses caught in his throat. Xantine raised a hand to forestall his defense, his choler falling as quickly as it had risen. No, my friend. No matter. I asked for your counsel, and in accordance with our honor, I value it. Toon settled into his seat, back rod straight. 2 votes for, 2 against, Xantine said. He turned to the only mortal amongst his advisors, though he wondered if she could truly be considered mortal now, and opened his palm with an invitation to speak. My muse, Phaedra, your counsel, please. She took long moments to answer, and when she did, it was with a voice that sounded like the wind through reeds. The crystals and chimes that hung from her ears swayed gently as she spoke, producing a sound like soft rain. Do they live, the people of this world? She asked. In luxury, my dear, Xantine said in response. They live above the clouds, in cities of polished stone and shaped marble, and their children want for nothing. She sighed in pleasure. It sounded like a soul escaping at the moment of death. I should like to see this world, Xantine, she said, her milky eyes staring into the middle distance, as if picturing the treats that awaited them. Her gnarled hands grasped gently at the air as she spoke, reaching for something Xantine couldn't see. Of course, assuming my dearest brother concurs with the course of action. Vivisk, tell me, will we take this prize as our own? The 6th and final member of the conclave slumped in his living chair, breathing heavily. Each rise and fall of Vivisk's chest was accompanied by a musical wheeze that jangled Xantine's nerves and set his jewel-studded teeth on edge. Buzzing, brassy, and electric, the life rhythm of the noise marine filled the air with static. Vivisk's body, so rarely removed from his baroque armor, was a ruin. The wet little mouths along his neck and upper chest opened and closed, their palpitating tongues and pursing lips visible under the silk of his already stained toga. It was a cracked reflection of what Xantine remembered. It was a cracked reflection of the man Xantine remembered, a warped vision of the most noble of their number. The noise marine heaved another musical breath, and his brass voice burred. No, Xantine, he intoned. This world is a distraction. Xantine's heart fell. He had expected Sarkor's reticence, even banked on it. Toon, too, was conservative, a natural voyeur rather than a participant, but Vivisk's denial threw his calculated gambit, engineering the conclave's vote of approval to offer legitimacy to his plans, into disarray. Some warlords ruled through vulgar force or displays of power. Others stocked their warbands with dullards and dimwits, unthinking slabs of muscle that shouldered the load for their masters. That was not the way of the Emperor's children. Theirs had been a collective of artists and aesthetes, the most cultured of all the legions, the most cultured beings in all the galaxy. Xantine thrived in company that stimulated him, but such an arrangement brought with it more practical concerns of control. His grip on power among the adored was light, like a rapier held in a fencer's stance, and Vavisk's support, typically unwavering, was the foundation on which he could legitimize his demands. My choirs have taken voice, following the Song of Slanesh. It guides us back to our legion, and back to our Primarch. It leads us beyond this little world, Vavisk heaved another sigh. To stop its cadence means death. Do you see, Sajant whispered in the depths of his soul, he has forsaken us. Vavisk, Xantine said, his honeyed voice betraying something of the genuine hurt he felt. We can make this world sing a new and glorious song. Millions liberated from the tyranny of the Corpse Emperor, living free and unfettered, with equal ability to indulge their every whim, all in the name of the youngest god, all in the name of us. There is only one song, Xantine, Vavisk said, fixing him with a red-eyed glare. It is the song of joy and agony, and it leads us to our brothers. Xantine indulged the Noise Marine's desires, as long as it suited him, promising the dream of the unification of the Third, but he would only seek out his brothers if he could command them, and there was little chance of that happening as long as Eidolon drew festering breath. The promise of unification, the threat of the Black Legion, his pledge to his dearest brother Vavisk that he would follow the strains of his mindless song, these were all truths of convenience, wielded by Xantine to destabilize and distract, head off any organized resistance to his command, with enemies both real and conjured. My brothers are here, Vavisk. Look around you. A surfeit of sensation for them to gorge on, and you deny them their feast for your dour asceticism? Must we prolong the satisfaction of today for tomorrow's fleeting promise? Vavisk was drawing away from him, from reality, with each passing year becoming insensate to earthly pleasures, and his entire body attuned to the music of the universe, music that only he could hear. His warband, his brothers, Xantine. He was forgetting and forgoing them, becoming a receiver for a truth beyond comprehension. Xantine opened his palms again. The right hand, he noticed, once again clenching a fist. How can I convince you, brother? You cannot, Xantine. He folded his hands together, a gesture of finality designed to folded his hands together. A gesture of finality designed in part to stop the involuntary motion in his right hand. Very well. 3 votes for, 3 votes again. Time, then, for the hidden blade. In this collective of equals, Xantine said, I am your superior, but I am a fair leader, and I respect your judgments, flawed as they may be. He shot dark glances at the dissenters as he spoke. But in this moment, my conclave, we are at an impasse, and so we turn to the final member of the group. Sarkle spoke up. No, she has no voice here. He yelled outrage in his voice. Vavisk, too, rumbled in his displeasure at what was to come. The mouths on his neck sucked and slathered, the wet sound of a nervous beast breathing hard. Silence, Xantine cut them both off. She is perfection given flesh, my flesh, and we will listen to her. Quarantoon, his mood the counterpart of his cousin's, broke his rigid posture to sit forward. Self-control lost as he rubbed his hands together, greedily, hunger in his eyes as the demonic spectacle about to unfold. Let her speak, my lord, he whispered. My darling, Xantine asked inwardly, my body is yours to take. There was this sensation, like fingers uncoupling from the embrace they shared, as he allowed himself to fall. As he fell, he saw Sajant ascend. Through a shimmering veil, a barrier that grew thicker and more opaque as he descended below the tides, down to the depths of his consciousness. Xantine's eyes rolled in his head. As he gripped the arms of his chair with transhuman force, the bones broke under his grip, and he heard a scream of agony. It was distant and fading, like a wave on a beach drawing back out to sea. Quieter and quieter, until he heard nothing but silence, and saw nothing but darkness. Those in the room saw Xantine sit forward again, his motions smoother and more graceful than before. His turquoise eyes now shining purple, a long tongue worked blackened lips. Sergeant spoke through Xantine's mouth. "You tarry too long, mortals," she said, her influence making their master's voice more sibilant, more ethereal than Xantine's deep tone. "The Prince of Pleasure aches for my return. Take me to Slanesh." "It is decided, then," Sarkwell said, his tone exultant. "Xantine's own pet has turned against him." She opened Xantine's mouth to speak again, but her words were drowned out only by a bang that rocked the exhortation. The slaves staggered, almost falling to the ground, and the chairs wailed as their huge occupants steadied themselves. Xantine felt the impact, even from his liminal space, and took the advantage of Sergeant's surprise to gain a foothold in his own body, dragging his consciousness back to the forefront. He closed his eyes, and when they reopened, they were turquoise again. "Gallia, report," Xantine said. The mound of flesh quivered for a moment, its tapered end slapping the bier that it lay upon as it cogitated. Eventually it spoke. "Combat analysis. Incoming fire from surface-to-void defense batteries on the planet below. Damage report. Major damage to plasma reactor. Major damage to primary engines. Major damage to secondary engines. Major damage to warp drive. Significant damage to weapon system. Situational report. Reactor leak contained. Engines inoperable. Warp drive inoperable. Main weapons inoperable. Recommendation: disable source of incoming fire." End chapter 4. I have to say, I'm really enjoying the politics of Emperor's Children politics. It's not something I thought we'd explore, but it's nice. I love the personalities they've given each of these guys. They're all very unique and interesting in their own way. I'm very, very curious to see more of he sounds like a Primaris Marine. What was his name again? He was on one of the early pages. The young one, who Xantine called my boy. What was his name again? Is he like one of Fabius Bile's Primaris Chaos Marines? Toricon, that's the one. I'm interested to see if they're going to make Chaos Space Marines like him for the Emperor's Children's model range when they refresh. I'm really eager to see these guys in action, because I've not seen Emperor's Children in combat in a full-on novel, because I've not really read any of the Horus Heresy stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see what that's going to be like, how these guys fight, because I like how everything just seems like they're struggling, their backs are up against the wall, and they are just doing what they can. I like the conflict in this group. I like that they're already on the brink of civil war, and that they were gonna go and do something more important than this. And the planet has just taken their ability to do that. Now they have to. They're locked into this course that most of them don't want to be on, including half of Xantine, Sergeant. And that's really interesting. I love how, like, Sergeant sometimes is on Xantine's side, but has her whole separate agenda. It's really interesting. I like Sergeant as a character. I want to see more of her. But yeah, I'll see you in the next part. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope that you enjoyed this chapter. If you have any thoughts or feedback, please drop a comment and let me know what you think. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also check out some of our other channel content here or live on Twitch, like game streams, community game nights, and miniature painting streams. You can also join our Discord for a lovely community and weekly movie nights. Or follow us on socials, like Twitter, Reddit, or Facebook for my silly meme posts. Anyway, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. Mwah!